first of all, hello everyone, at least the 14 viewers we have for now. We are here live with RiffLive, which is a new platform for science journalism in Germany. And we try to mix things up today a little because we are hosting a Q&A which is open to everybody. So we encourage you guys to tweet us questions you have via Twitter with the hashtag ReadMe, and we will try to get as many as possible of those questions involved in this conversation. And we will do this conversation in English. Even though I know that a lot of the audience will be in German, just for the sake for better interviewing you, Michal. And yeah, after explaining,
I would not be able to respond in German.
And yeah, after explaining this format, we should explain like who you are, Michal. So Michal is a researcher at Stanford University, a professor, matter of fact, correct?
I do research as well. I'm an assistant professor at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford.
Okay, and Michal has developed a method to assess personality traits by looking at what people like on Facebook. And this alone is pretty amazing from what I can say, but what makes it kind of a little explosive is that there is a firm out there called Cambridge Analytica that claims that they use this approach to make people vote for Brexit and make people vote for Donald Trump, because they actually use targeted ads using those like Facebook profiling and try to convince people. And there was an article in a Swiss magazine called Das Magazin, and it reported about your research and about what Cambridge Analytica claims to do with it. And it stirred, to say the least, a big fuzz in German media, going back and forth between science journalists, whether like the claims made in this article are fair or not. And I thought the best thing to do, at least from my view, is like interview the researcher who was at the beginning of this food chain of big data in psychology. So it is about big data in psychology, the chances, risks, and constraints. And first of all, Michal, how did you come up with this approach using Facebook for like psychological profiling?
Well, my research from the very early beginning was about trying to measure psychological traits like personality or intelligence. But then as a young researcher, I was also interested in digital environments. And then very early on at the beginning of my PhD, I realized that instead of asking people to fill a psychometric questionnaire to ask them, questions about, how they feel about things, or whether they like partying or they like hardworking, instead we can just look at their digital footprints. And it's not only Facebook likes, but also status updates, tweets, emails, web browsing history, web searching history. So basically a wide range of different digital footprints. Other researchers looked at credit card records or loyalty cards records. And it seems that all of those types of digital footprints allow computers, because not humans, but allow computers to make very accurate predictions about individuals' intimate traits. And obviously, you don't need a rocket scientist to, figure out that someone is a Democrat or Republican when they write on their Facebook wall, "Hey, I'm a Republican" or "I'm a Democrat," or like Obama, right? You don't need a rocket scientist to do that. But what's really interesting and potentially really dangerous, and also potentially really useful, is that you can make the same accurate predictions based on type of signal that is not related at all to political views. Related to the songs, you can make those predictions based on the songs that people listen to, or type of videos they watch on YouTube, or books they read. And it's not only political orientation, but also personality, IQ, sexual orientation, religion, name it. Most of the things we try to predict were very easily predictable.
Okay, could you try to explain it a little more? So how exactly does this cross-matching work, that you kind of, let's say, start out with a Daft Punk song that I like and then predict what kind of party I'm likely to vote?
So interestingly, the method is actually pretty simple. The magic is not in the method. The magic is in the data. So what happens is that most of the things that happen to us in our lives, and most of the things that we do in our lives or like in our lives, are in some very minute, very small way related to each other. It doesn't have to be a causal relationship. It can be, correlational relationship. Maybe, people who are liberal or people who are conservative, they also tend to read same books, or tend to hang out in the same bars, or study at the same universities, and then they would perhaps slightly more often than average listen to certain songs and whatnot. So this type of signal, or this type of connections, are very difficult to detect for humans. But computers can basically see through gigabytes of data and spot patterns, very small and for humans insignificant patterns. But then computers can basically aggregate those patterns over huge amounts of data and come up with very accurate predictions.
Okay, and in this article that kind of stirred up this debate, you said, okay, at some point you realized what kind of bomb this is. When did you actually realize that your method, your research could be used very well to actually manipulate people?
Well, I think that from the very early beginning, so when my first publication actually ever on this subject was basically a word of warning that, look, in the past, only a psychologist equipped with a questionnaire could do it, which basically requires the consent of the person that's being assessed. No one can assess your personality or IQ without you actively participating in using traditional methods. But what's worrying about this approach is that this can be done without you even knowing that your profile is being assessed. And some people may have absolutely no problem with that. I can tell you what my personality is or what my political views are. I don't mind people knowing. But I'm also aware that many other people mind and want to keep this trait private, and I think they deserve the right to remain unknown in terms of their personality, IQ, sexual orientation, or political views.
Okay, thank you so much for already getting really deep into this this topic. We now have kind of the first tweets actually of people asking you questions, and I would like to read some of them. So one of them is asking, is it harder to deploy big data in Europe or in Germany, where data protection is stronger? Do you believe in that, or do you think it will be more or less the same whether it is about German or European elections compared to US and British elections?
So I want to stress that I'm not a lawyer. I'm a big data scientist, computational psychologist. So I can talk to computational psychology side of it, but it's more difficult for me to be competent about legal issues. What I know for sure, and I learned it from my conversations with lawyers, is that unfortunately there is a paradox here on the in the internet space. That on one hand we want to keep it free of national borders, but it also means the jurisdiction of German law or European law can be very easily circumvented. You can start your platform in United States and then make those predictions for users in Europe, and other way around. So when United States also is working on privacy laws, and they already have quite a few privacy laws in place, but you can very easily circumvent that by conducting predictions in England, for instance.
Okay. We have another question who was posted by somebody who posted the question earlier. That was by Marcus, and he said you never checked for actually election data in your studies as far as he could see, even though you had this warning included in even the very first studies. And he was asking, why do you think it is possible to influence voting outcome with your method if actually there is not a specific study that looked into exactly this topic?
Well, first of all, I want to stress that I don't have a strong belief. First of all, I don't have a scientific belief in it because I didn't check it, as the Twitter user rightly pointed out. My studies focus on the fact that it's possible to infer your intimate traits from your digital footprints. Now I'm working on a new project. I also already have results in there, not yet published, which show that now we can use this knowledge of someone's personality to improve the efficiency of marketing, right? The click-through rates and conversion rates rise by the factor of 2. Now, how efficient it is in swaying voters that are undecided, I have no idea. People can talk about it, and I hope that we will know in the future that there will be studies showing how efficient it is. But I don't think we know at the moment. What we know for sure is that the very intimate traits of people can be revealed because their data is not protected enough.
Okay, but you already pointed out to a certain extent, okay, you have an educated guess, but there is no actual study on how good like Facebook targeting works in order to persuade voters to give a certain vote. However, Cambridge Analytica, and that's the firm that kind of claims to use your approach, they claim that they were a major factor in the Brexit vote. They were a major factor in Trump becoming the president-elect. And so how realistic do you think is this claim? Do you really think that they can claim that? Or is it just, okay, the case of, okay, whenever you are the winner, you can claim that the gear, the tools that you used were actually a major factor, even though you're not really sure about it? I mean, it could also be the hairdresser of Donald Trump that gets major credit for actually him running.
I think that he clearly gets the main credit here. Well, I agree with you that, you know, being a CEO of a company or being a company that's that is providing and selling certain method biases you, and you're way more likely to say, look, you know, our approach clearly works. What is actually very difficult here is that those questions are extremely difficult to study, right? We only have observational data. It's very difficult to organize an experiment, you know, have two Americas. In one America, you know, Trump gets support from the big data company. In other America, he doesn't, and otherwise we control everything else. It's very difficult to set up an experiment like that. So unluckily, when it comes to world-wide or country-wide policies or country-wide phenomena, it's very difficult to provide, you know, ultimate, definitive scientific answers, because basically we cannot experiment here. We see something happening, we do not know what would happen if this would not be happening, right? It's one of the big problems with science and policy making in general, that it's very difficult to check the alternative outcomes.
That's kind of interesting because before we have this talk, one of the users prior to this Q&A already posted the question, what makes you, or what at least makes Cambridge Analytica so sure about the causality of things? Because right now it's a lot of looking at correlation, but you can't really say, okay, because we targeted people better, they matter of fact were more in favor of Donald Trump. So do you think that to a certain extent this criticism is kind of fair, and how do you think at some later stage maybe it will be possible to actually tell where is the causality? Or is it just like, okay, it could as well be that it was just a lucky guess, a lucky winner, and that's the reason why Cambridge Analytica and this kind of method gets so much attention right now?
Look, first of all, I do not think that it's thanks to Cambridge Analytica or any big data company that Donald Trump won the election. Donald Trump won the election because he was a more appealing candidate to people in right states, right? So I believe that instead of focusing on blaming big data when it comes to liberalism and Western values being in retreat across the world, we should rather blame the political, or not blame ourselves and blame politicians that represent us, that maybe we fail to listen to and talk to a large part of the population. And, you know, you have all of this talk about how, you know, internet's now radicalized in the right direction. I think it's absolute rubbish. It's just that, you know, elites sitting in Berlin and San Francisco and New York suddenly realized that, you know, the rest of the country got connected to Facebook as well, and now they also are talking there. So I think that in a way it's a great thing happening, because there was a huge disconnection between, you know, general population and, you know, few liberal people sitting in their cocktail on the cocktail parties and kind of discussing political issues. So I think it's absolutely great, and I completely do not subscribe to echo chamber myth. I think that Facebook and other communication channels actually expose people to opposing views, and it's absolutely great. Having said that, I think that big data methods might have been, you know, this drop that spilled the cup, right? The kind of might have been deciding factor. Whether it is deciding factor or not, we don't know yet. I hope that there will be more studies on this subject. I'm studying it myself, and we'll be able to answer this question in the future. But again, I think that regardless whether it worked or not, what's really a problem here is that there's the end of anonymity. This is the end of privacy. You can no longer retain your sexual orientation private or your political views private. You can no longer retain your IQ or personality private. And by the way, all of those traits in many jurisdictions, in European Union, for instance, they are protected. If I'm a psychologist, I cannot just record your IQ and without your consent keep it in my office. It's a protected information, and it's great that it's protected information. But when I'm Facebook or Google, I can record likes or status updates or tweets, which allow me to very accurately estimate your IQ, political views, or sexual orientation, and suddenly those laws do not apply to me anymore. And you know what? Maybe it's okay, because how you would have, I can't imagine how internet would function without actually this information being out there, visible to people. We wouldn't be able to tweet to each other. But we definitely need to rethink how the policy works to make sure that we protect our privacy is protected in a better way.
Okay, just for everyone who's just joining us, so this is a video Q&A hosted by Riff, which is a new platform for science journalists in Germany. And how it works is like we also have a lot of questions stacked up here, but actually we want you guys also to send in your questions. And this is very simple via Twitter, via the hashtag ReadMe. That's at least what we're filtering for. We can also directly tweet to a Riff reporter or to me. Haluka MB is my Twitter handle. And yeah, Michal, you just brought up that you said, okay, you don't believe in the echo chamber. And you think like it's just that all of a sudden like more rural parts or parts of the population that have been kind of neglected, and now all of a sudden up and part of Facebook, you can actually see what they think about. But to a certain extent, don't you think that in a social media age, and at least I can claim that from my Twitter feed or my Facebook feed, we get kind of a more sorted out way of getting information? So me, for instance, more getting left-leaning views than like right-wing conservative views, because the only time I actually get to see right-wing views is when left-wing newspapers or media outlets are reporting on them. So do you really think that the echo chamber not existing is a true fact?
Echo chamber is not created by technology. Echo chamber is created by us, by you basically not going out of your box and checking out, other Twitter channels. Obviously, you can use technology to create an echo chamber, right? But also compare it with the past. If you're born in a little town and your priest and your librarian were conservative or they were liberal, you were only limited to their point of view. You had no other way of knowing the world. There was a national TV station, there was national radio that was playing program that was approved by national government. And you basically had no choice of content. That was a huge echo chamber. There wasn't even an echo chamber, there was just a broadcasting chamber. Now, obviously, Facebook and Twitter and other recommendation platforms will recommend to you content that you seem to like, right? So there's no question about it. And you know what? Of course they do it because we like it. We love to read stuff that confirms our views. But now, it never happened in the history before. It's the first time in history with Twitter, Facebook, and online newspapers and journalism and so on, that it is one click away. You're one click away from the views that are completely opposing to your views. So this is one thing. And second thing is that those recommendation systems very often discover content for you that you would never ever discover. You can imagine conservative people or liberal people that actually have opposite leaning. They just never kind of discovered them or built upon them because they were surrounded by the bubble. But now they go to Facebook or Twitter, and Twitter or Facebook have a chance actually through the recommendation system technology to look through the surface and see, oh, actually this person, they seem to be only interested in cars. But look, actually they listen to this song or kind of like this artist. We know that people who listen to these songs or like these artists actually also like, philosophy. Why don't we just post something in the world about philosophy? And boom, the bubble is burst. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not but it's not uneasy because of the technology. It's not easy because how humans basically love their bubbles.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Okay, so you think to a certain extent it is about our courage to burst the bubble on our own. So you say it's become easier than ever to actually burst the bubble, where opposed to that, when we used to live in smaller towns, we couldn't get out of the bubble. Does that makes kind of sense?
That's correct. Look, I think that people are basically whining. I'm sorry to say, but it's just, you know, you have people sitting in their echo chambers that they created themselves for themselves. And then instead of basically going to the newspaper that doesn't represent their view and reading few articles, or following few thinkers on the other side of the barricade that do not represent their, you know, their team, and listening to them for a second, instead of actually doing that, they just keep whining about, oh, I'm just closed in this, you know, echo chamber. And I'm like, look, mate, you're a click away from all of this information out there, and compare yourself with a person 100 years ago that they have no way of discovering anything outside of their little universe. So basically, I encourage every proponent of echo chamber to stop whining and just use their mouse and keyboards to go and read stuff outside of the box.
Okay, coming back a little more to the method that you use, we have one question coming in from Sebastian Olieni, and he said, what would you say are the leading personality models usable for big data competing with yours? It's kind of a similar question to another question that was posed earlier. So were these methods that you kind of invented used before Trump and Brexit, and why is it different this time how it's used compared to the other methods? Because a lot of people pointed out Cambridge Analytica is not the first company using big data for targeting ads in terms of elections.
Of course not. Every single ad platform is using ad targeting. So maybe they don't refer to their system as Ocean or Big Five, so they don't refer to the system as personality-based systems, but they still represent humans in terms of some latent dimensions, some psychological dimensions. They just don't name them, right? It's just that they discover these dimensions from online behavior of humans and then use those dimensions to target people. Now, when I say they use those dimensions, they're computers that use dimensions. And I also want to stress that, you know, first of all, I didn't develop Big Five or Ocean. This is a very well-established and perhaps the most popular personality framework out there. And it has been measured for many years. It's just that before, it used to be measured using questionnaires. So what I think I was one of the people that first has shown and has illustrated that instead of using questionnaires, you can use Facebook likes, Facebook status updates, tweets, web browsing logs, search logs, credit cards operations. You can use people's geographical location and basically a huge array of digital footprints to predict personality as well as other psychological traits like intelligence, sexuality, political views, and so on. And at the end of the day, I want to stress one thing, that it's not a difficult model to develop. It's not, you know, you don't need to be a rocket science to do it. It's enough if you're a psychologist, or you can also do it. What's difficult is basically getting data to train the model. You need large data set to train the model. Once you got that, it becomes really easy. And I want to stress that plenty of those big data sets are freely available online, right? So think about Twitter. Twitter lets you combine language samples with political views, because many of the Twitter users will reveal their political views on Twitter. So now what happens is that you can train the model linking their political views with the language, and this model will become very good at predicting political views. And now you can apply this model to all of those Twitter users that never mention their political views, right? What happens is now you can reveal the political views for people who never ever wanted to reveal it in the first place, which again, some people have no problem with. I think that some other people will have problem with.
But regarding this, there has been some kind of criticism from certain science journalists that said, okay, for instance, you said in I think it was the PNAS study from 2012 that you could predict by a percentage of 88% the sexual orientation of a person, saying like you could estimate to 88% correctly whether somebody would be gay or not. And they kind of made the mathematical example for that this might sound great, but still, if you would actually calculate into the false positive and the false negatives, you still end up with a 50-50% in certain scenarios of being wrong. So like, what makes you so sure that big data is, like, at least from what it sounds like, from how you pose it, so many times a lot better than any other model?
I'm sorry to say, but this is a strawman argument. So first of all, obviously, when you try to predict phenomena that are relatively rare, like homosexuality has a prevalence of 7% among males.
Mm-hmm.
So because it's only 7%, so actually the even better than 88%, you can just say everyone is straight, and then you're getting 93% accuracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's silly, and we have the same thing, let's say, with detecting HIV. HIV has a prevalence of 2% in the population, so even if you have 99% accurate test, you also would have only 50-50 chances of detecting an individual with HIV, right? And the other way around, you have a lot of false positives. Now, does it mean that we should abandon this test? Of course not. Those are very accurate tests, and we should be using them. So this is the first point. The second point is that unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, totally fortunately, computer prediction algorithms are super accurate. Think about Google. You go to Google, you write few words that are stupid and ungrammatically written. I do it all the time. And Google kind of says, okay, Michal, I know what you mean anyway. This is what you're searching for. It's a super smart machine, super smart algorithm. Think about Google Maps. You drive somewhere, Google Maps tells you where to go. It's way better than your wife, which surprises especially your wife usually, or your husband. So computers taught us that they are really accurate. So now the problem is that even if this algorithm is not 100% accurate, it might not matter. If you're Westboro Baptist Church and you want to lynch some gay people or some black people or whatever, well, actually, you don't need a computer algorithm to detect the latter. But if you want to, like, shame some gay people and write some bad slogans on the doors, you don't care about whether it was accurate judgment or not, right? You just will take the computer prediction on the face value because computers trained us that whatever decisions they make, they're accurate. And actually, it's true because those predictions are really accurate.
Okay, but you already kind of, like, with this pretty harsh example you've already pointed out, like, your method, or at least, like, this big data approach, could be used in a lot of bad ways, and maybe we're already seeing some of it to this extent. So my question is, like, actually it fits very well to a question a user posted. What can people do in order to learn more about themselves using big data, and how can they become more self-aware, and maybe also kind of make sure that they're not that much manipulated as it seems to be right now to be the case?
Well, I think that obviously we focused on the negative in this conversation so far, which I personally do not think that this is the only or the major angle that should be used here, because this technology, big data-based predictions, as any other technology developed by humans, is more or less morally neutral. You can use it to, better our existence, and you can use it to absolutely make our life miserable. And I think that what I'm really excited about, apart from being worried about the privacy implications, what I'm really excited about is that those technologies can be used to greatly improve the well-being, job satisfaction, psychological health of people. Think about job matching. Now, job matching, career advice, psychological assessment in terms of employment is limited to wealthy and affluent people in wealthy and affluent countries. The rest of the world, the rest of the workforce, is deprived of the benefits of psychological assessments when it comes to finding a matching job. If we can develop those tools that are based on your digital footprints, and we find a way that is ethically sound, like people contributing their data, people coming to a platform and saying, hey, platform, can you please analyze my digital footprints? Can you please give me some additional questionnaires, and then tell me, advise me on which career path to take? This could really improve lives of huge numbers of people. Think about diagnosing depression, or diagnosing other psychological ailments, and so on. There's basically so many positive applications here that, you would probably need quite a few
No, sure, but
to discuss that.
But as we kind of approaching 4:30 or 5:30 for those who are watching it in Germany, let's kind of wrap it up with one last question. So you kind of mentioned all those positive things that this big data psychology can give us. But we talked also about like all the threats that are out there, be it like that this kind of psychology is used in order to manipulate people. Do you see there any way to make sure as a society, and especially as you as a scientist, to take the good and not take the bad as at the same time? Is there any way that you see to make sure that big data psychology is used for our benefit, but not in order to manipulate people?
Look, this is a very difficult question, and I think about it a lot. I don't think I have clear answers here. What I think is important is that people realize that those are not trivial matters, and we are living in good times. We're living in with times that are characterized by probably the largest freedom that humankind ever had, and largest prosperity and largest well-being. But it has not always been like that, and truly in the future the pendulum will swing in the other way as well. So I think that we should remember that, you know, lack of privacy, digital exposure is fine today. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, maybe those risks will become more real. So I think that we should really try to vote for politicians and policymakers that are concerned with the issue. Choose technologies and exert pressure on technology companies to basically protect our privacy to a larger extent. Large companies can do a lot in this direction. Technology is already there. Privacy protecting technology. We have amazing privacy protecting technology. We are not really using it much. And also, at the end of the day, I think that this is a signal that we should really push for tolerance, right? It was, look, think about the following. United States is a big ally of Saudi Arabia. We know that in Saudi Arabia, if you're an atheist or if you're gay, it's punishable by death. That's the law of the country. Now, US can say, okay, we still can work with Saudi Arabia because, you know, if you're atheist or gay, just don't say it and you'll be fine. And we kind of can still excuse our collaboration with this country. But if you realize that you can take someone's tweets or status updates or other types of digital footprint and reveal this information without their knowledge, is it still okay to work with countries who criminalize being different? And I think that we should be pushing in this direction, that because maybe we will not be able to protect privacy of everyone, we should make sure that when the privacy is challenged or compromised, that they will not suffer the consequences.
Okay, that's kind of interesting takeaway. So you say kind of it is more about tolerance than because absolute privacy might not be existing anymore in the digital age. Does that make sense? Is that kind of a
That's totally correct.
Okay. Michal, I know you have to have you have another appointment in about 10 minutes, so we have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for taking the time for this this format. I hope it was enjoyable for you. I hope to the viewers out there that at least some of the questions you had were answered. I know it's an incredibly difficult topic. My head is still swirling, but thank you to all of you watching this broadcast. Thank you so much, Michal, once again for taking part in it. And I hope we all keep kind of like our eye on this debate, because I think it's the most interesting one that is out there in the world of science, maybe.
Thank you, guys. It was really interesting to be here.
Thank you. Bye.